What if I told you that the true story of the most illustrious families of the Gilded Age was written not in ballrooms, but on the black staircases for servants? Behind the grand facades of New York mansions and London townhouses lay a world where walls had ears and silence was the most valuable commodity. In these huge houses, filled with antiques and fresh flowers, servants became the unwitting keepers of their master's darkest secrets. They saw what lay behind the polite smiles at dinner parties, cold alienation, shattered hopes, and the quiet tragedies of women locked in golden cages. Their keen eyes noticed the slightest changes in the atmosphere of the house, foreshadowing a storm long before it erupted into public scandal. This is a story about invisible witnesses who knew about the collapse of a marriage by the sound of a door closing or an untouched breakfast on a tray. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn what little details of domestic life became an unmistakable signal to the servants that a brilliant union was falling apart at the seams. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the layout of luxurious mansions contributed to the destruction of family ties? At the end of the 19th century, the architecture of wealthy homes created the perfect conditions for marital alienation. Huge spaces were designed so that husbands and wives could live under the same roof without ever really crossing paths. Each had their own private quarters, including a bedroom, boudoir, dressing room, and bathroom, often located in different wings of the house. This separation, originally intended to provide comfort and privacy, often turned into an insurmountable chasm between spouses. The servants were the first to notice when this architectural distance became a symbol of emotional separation. But when a black cat ran between husband and wife, the click of the lock on that door sounded like a death sentence. A maid bringing her mistress her morning tea might find that the door to the master's room was bolted from his side. It was a silent but eloquent gesture, signifying a refusal of communication and physical intimacy. For the servants responsible for cleaning and maintaining order, these locked doors became a source of constant tension and gossip. They had to find workarounds to perform their duties, trying not to disturb the gloomy seclusion of their masters. They saw their mistress sitting for hours in her boudoir, staring at this closed door with an expression of deep anguish or cold anger. The silence in the corridors connecting the spouses' quarters became heavy and oppressive, as if before a storm. This architectural barrier became the physical embodiment of the wall of misunderstanding that had grown between the two people. For women of that era, this isolation in their own luxurious apartments often became unbearable torment. Surrounded by silks, velvets, and gilding, they felt like prisoners, deprived of warmth and human compassion. The richness of the interiors only emphasized the emptiness of their lives and the coldness of their relationship with the person who should have been closest to them. The servants saw these tears of despair, hidden from the rest of the world behind heavy curtains and closed doors. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. Do you think that personal space in marriage can cause estrangement, or is it a necessity? Write about it in the comments. What if I told you that the most dramatic family dramas played out in absolute silence? In the Victorian era and the Gilded Age, shared meals were a sacred ritual, a pillar of family life and social status. A 7-course dinner, served according to all the rules of etiquette, was not just a meal but a demonstration of prosperity and harmony. When a marriage began to fall apart, the first sign for the butler and footman was the oppressive silence that reigned at the table. Whereas before, the spouses would exchange news of the day, discuss plans, or at least engage in polite small talk, now their mouths were shut. The only sounds in the huge dining room were the clinking of silverware against porcelain and the rustling of dresses. The servants moved around the table like silent shadows, afraid to break the tense silence with an awkward movement. Every clatter of a plate seemed deafening in this atmosphere of thick hostility. The footmen standing behind their masters' chairs saw tense backs, clenched jaws, and eyes fixed on the void or on their plates. They noticed how the mistress's hands trembled when she lifted her glass of water, or how the master nervously crumpled his napkin. Their entire posture expressed a desire to be as far away from this table and from each other as possible. But social norms required them to sit here and play the role of a happy couple until the very end of dessert. For women, these dinners often turned into real torture, as each sip was difficult under the heavy gaze of their husbands. They sat straight as a string, laced into corsets, unable to show their true feelings. The luxurious food on their plates seemed tasteless, and the glitter of silver and crystal only emphasized the coldness of their existence. The servants who cleared away the almost untouched dishes knew that this table had long since ceased to satisfy hunger and was now only a tedious social obligation. These silent meals were a daily reminder that the marriage had become an empty formality, devoid of warmth and life. They demonstrated that even surrounded by incredible luxury, people can be completely lonely and unhappy. Only the silent servants were the sole witnesses to this daily drama unfolding behind the closed doors of the dining room. Why do you think maintaining the appearance of well-being was so important at that time that people were willing to endure such torment? Now let's move on to the next chapter, where you will learn what secrets the master's bedrooms held. What I am about to show you was hidden from prying eyes behind 7 locks and thick curtains. If the dining room and living room were the stage for public performances, the bedroom and boudoir of the mistress of the house were the place where the masks were finally taken off. It was here, in this intimate space, that a woman was left alone with her pain, fears, and disappointment. And the only person who saw this other side of a glamorous life was the personal maid, the chambermaid, whose status brought her closer to the mistress than anyone else. The chambermaid knew more about her mistress's marriage than her own mother or best friends, who could not be trusted with the whole truth. She was the one who combed her mistress's hair before bed and saw her tear-stained face in the mirror, stripped of her daytime makeup and feigned cheerfulness. She helped her unlace her tight corset, and with it, she seemed to lift the burden of daily worries and pretense from her shoulders. In these moments of silence and solitude between them, a special, almost silent bond arose, based on a shared knowledge of a hidden truth. The main clues to her nighttime suffering were the traces the maid found in the morning when she tidied up the room. Wet, crumpled handkerchiefs hidden under the pillow or forgotten on the bedside table spoke of hours of nighttime weeping. The tear stains on the silk pillowcases spoke louder than any words, testifying to sleepless nights spent in loneliness and despair. These silent witnesses to grief were carefully removed and washed away, as if erasing the very memory of nighttime weakness. Another alarming sign was the untouched beds in the master bedroom, or conversely, traces that he had spent the night on the couch in his study. The maid bringing morning coffee saw the perfectly made bed that no one had slept in and realized that the master had not spent the night at home again. Or she would find the mistress asleep in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, having waited in vain for her husband's return. These images of morning loneliness spoke of the deep chasm separating the spouses. The boudoir became a kind of sanctuary of grief, a place where a woman could be herself, even if that self was broken and unhappy. Servants who had access to this space unwittingly became keepers of these secrets, bound by silence and professional duty. They saw the underside of the golden cage and understood the high price their mistresses paid for the outward glamour of their lives. If you were moved by this story about women's hidden experiences, please like it so we know that such topics are important to you. Guess what happened when the front door of the mansion closed after a glittering reception? High society life in the Gilded Age was an endless theater where everyone played their strictly assigned roles. Spouses had to present the world with a perfect picture of family happiness, prosperity, and mutual respect. However, the servants who saw their masters before and after this public performance knew how vast the gap was between the stage image and reality. The moment of truth came when the carriage with the couple left the opera house or ballroom and headed home. In the dark enclosed space of the carriage, hidden from prying eyes, they could finally take off their masks. The coachman and footman often heard muffled sounds of quarrels, sarcastic remarks, or even worse, heavy hostile silence. What seemed to the public to be the perfect couple turned into 2 strangers, deeply unhappy people, in the darkness of the carriage. The servants witnessed the most dramatic contrast when their masters returned home after a long evening in the spotlight. The butler, opening the heavy oak doors, saw the smiles that had just been shining on the couple's faces instantly fade, as if blown-out candles. As soon as they crossed the threshold of their home, The husband's polite attentiveness gave way to cold indifference or irritation. The wife's shoulders, which had been proudly straightened just a moment before, slumped under the weight of an invisible burden. The servants saw how much energy it took for their mistresses to maintain this public mask of well-being. They noticed how, before going out in public, the mistress would take sedatives to calm her trembling hands and give her face a serene expression. They saw how she would spend hours rehearsing a friendly smile in front of the mirror, which was supposed to hide her inner pain and disappointment. This daily performance required tremendous nervous tension and drained her emotional strength. For the servants, their employer's double life was a constant source of cynicism and pity. They saw that wealth and high social status did not guarantee happiness, but sometimes became a golden cage from which it was impossible to escape. They understood that behind every diamond necklace and every luxurious reception lay a story of pain and pretense. Why do you think public opinion was more important to people of that era than their own happiness and peace of mind? In the next chapter, we will talk about what happened when emotions did get out of control. Sometimes the tension that had been building up for months and years behind closed doors and polite smiles reached a critical point and burst out. These moments were rare, as upbringing and social norms demanded the strictest self-control, but they were all the more shocking for the household. Servants, accustomed to the silent war of glances and icy silence, were suddenly confronted with physical evidence of violent family scenes. These were not loud scandals with broken dishes in the kitchen, but quiet yet devastating explosions of despair in the master's chambers. A maid sorting through her mistress's belongings might discover a ball gown with torn lace or a torn hem. This could have been the result of an awkward movement, but more often than not, it meant that the woman had desperately torn off this outfit, which had become a symbol of her public humiliation. Sometimes traces resembling wine or tear stains could be seen on the delicate fabric, which had been carefully attempted to be washed away. Particularly telling were the findings in men's offices or libraries, where the owners often gave vent to their anger. An overturned chair, an ink stain on an expensive Persian rug, a dent in a wooden wall panel from a punch. All this spoke of the raging passions that were usually hidden behind a mask of gentlemanly restraint. Servants silently tidied everything up, erasing the traces of the night's storm as if it had never happened. Sometimes personal items of special sentimental value fell victim to these emotional outbursts. A broken picture frame, a torn letter, a broken fan, once given as a gift during the days of happy courtship. The destruction of these items was a symbolic act, an attempt to erase the memory of past happiness, which now only caused pain. The sight of these broken trifles evoked a special feeling of aching pity in the servants. The servants never asked questions or discussed these findings aloud, at least not in the presence of their employers. Their task was to clean up the mess as quickly and discreetly as possible, restoring the perfect image of the house. The butler called a restorer to repair the furniture, the housekeeper ordered a new vase to replace the broken one, and the maid mended the dress. The house had to look impeccable, despite the chaos reigning in the souls of its inhabitants. The servants, who had been observing life in the house for years, learned to piece together the story of the family's breakdown from these fragments. They knew that behind every broken cup there could be a night of tears, and behind every overturned chair there could be a scene of jealousy or cold humiliation. These objects became part of an invisible archive of family dramas, stored in the memory of the house and its silent inhabitants. What if I told you that the breakdown of the family did not begin with loud arguments, but with a change in the usual schedule? In the Victorian era, life in a large house was governed by a strict order that had been established over many years. The schedule of breakfasts, lunches, receptions, and outings was the skeleton on which the entire organism of the estate was based. For the servants, this order was law, and any deviation from it was perceived as an alarm signal, foreshadowing serious changes in the lives of their masters. Then the mistress's life began to change. A woman whose day had previously been scheduled down to the minute, visits, charity committees, fittings at the dressmakers, suddenly began to spend more and more time in her rooms. She canceled visits, citing ill health, and refused to receive guests. The house, which had previously been the center of social life, gradually sank into silence and isolation. The servants, accustomed to a clear rhythm of life, found themselves at a loss. Footmen in ceremonial livery stood for hours in the empty hall, waiting for guests who never appeared. The cook was indignant when her exquisite dishes remained untouched or were canceled at the last minute. The well-oiled mechanism of running the house began to malfunction, reflecting the chaos reigning in the owner's relationship. The cessation of joint outings by the spouses became particularly noticeable. Whereas before they had regularly appeared together at the theater, opera, or balls, now each began to lead their own separate social life. The mistress might go to a concert accompanied by a female companion, while the master might go to the races in the company of other men. This was a public acknowledgement that their union had become purely formal. An atmosphere of uncertainty and anxious anticipation reigned in the house. The servants did not know what to expect from tomorrow. Would there be a grand reception, or would the house once again be plunged into gloomy silence? Orders became contradictory. The mood of the hosts changed for no apparent reason, and the staff constantly felt as if they were living on a volcano. The change in routine was not just a domestic inconvenience, but a symptom of the family's demise. Deprived of its usual rhythm of life, the house seemed to lose its soul, turning into a cold and uncomfortable place. And the servants, like no one else, felt this change, realizing that the good old days were gone forever. How important do you think a set order and daily routine are for the psychological climate in a family? Now let's find out how financial problems added fuel to the fire of family troubles. Financial problems often became the catalyst that accelerated the breakdown of already fragile marriages during the Gilded Age. External glamour and luxury often concealed huge debts, failed investments, or the husband's gambling losses. For women whose well-being and social status depended entirely on their husband's financial solvency, these problems became a source of constant fear and humiliation. Servants, who seemed far removed from their master's financial affairs, were the first to notice the signs of an impending economic storm. The first warning signs were frequent visits from creditors and managers. The butler, opening the door to respectable gentlemen with briefcases, saw their tense faces and heard raised voices coming from his master's office. These meetings, which had previously been rare and businesslike, now became regular and clearly unpleasant for both sides. After such visits, the master often left his office in a rage or deep thought, and an even more oppressive atmosphere reigned in the house. The servants began to notice changes in spending habits. The master, who had previously not counted the money spent on wine and cigars, suddenly began to nitpick the bills from the butcher or grocer. The housekeeper had to cut back on kitchen expenses, which caused discontent among the cooks and a decline in the quality of meals. The household began to economize on candles, coal for the fireplaces, and other small items, which had been unthinkable in the days of prosperity. These secret assignments became a severe test of the servant's loyalty. The chambermaid, carrying her mistress's family brooch to the pawn shop, felt like an accomplice to a crime. She saw the tears and despair of her mistress, forced to part with things dear to her heart in order to maintain the appearance of prosperity. Financial problems exacerbated all the existing contradictions in the marriage. The husband, feeling guilty for his business failures, became even more irritable and withdrawn. The wife, living in constant fear of poverty and disgrace, lost the last remnants of respect for her spouse. Money, which had previously been a means of enjoying life, now became a source of constant conflict and mutual recriminations. The servants saw how the fear of poverty was eating away at their master's souls, turning them into petty, suspicious, and unhappy people. The golden cage began to tarnish, and through the gilding, the cold metal of need and uncertainty showed through. This experience showed the servants how fragile wealth could be and how quickly it could turn to despair. At the end of the 19th century, when a woman of high society could no longer cope with the pressure of an unhappy marriage, she had only one socially acceptable way out: illness. Nervous disorder, migraine, exhaustion. These euphemisms were used to describe a wide range of conditions, from deep depression to hysteria caused by unbearable living conditions. For the servants, these diagnoses were a transparent veil hiding the true tragedy of their mistresses. The house was plunged into a hospital-like atmosphere. The windows in the mistress's room were constantly curtained, creating a perpetual twilight designed to protect her shaken nerves. The servants tiptoed around and whispered, afraid to disturb the patient with the slightest noise. The door knocker was wrapped in cloth, and straw was scattered in front of the house to muffle the sound of passing carriages. The whole house began to live in rhythm with its mistress's illness. The servants saw their once energetic and cheerful mistress turn into a pale shadow of her former self. She lay in bed or on the couch all day, staring blankly at the ceiling, showing no interest in anything, not even her own children. Her face took on the expression of a frozen mask of suffering, and her eyes were constantly red from crying or cloudy from the effects of medication. For her husband, his wife's illness often became a convenient excuse to distance himself from her even more. He could show polite concern in public, but at home he was relieved to entrust her care to doctors and servants. This freed him from the need to communicate with his wife, solve family problems, and generally be present in her life. Nervous disorder became the perfect alibi for his indifference. This chapter of life at home was the quietest and saddest. It demonstrated how a society that deprived women of the right to direct rebellion or divorce forced them to destroy themselves, retreating into illness as the only available refuge. And the servants were the ones who stood at the bedside of this slow, socially approved death of the soul. The final stage of marital breakdown witnessed by the servants was a life of complete separation, when spouses became neighbors, sharing the same address but not the same life. It was a state of cold truce when acute conflicts had already died down, giving way to dull indifference and final alienation. The huge house allowed them to exist autonomously, without crossing paths for weeks or even months. Communication between the spouses was kept to a minimum and took place exclusively through third parties. The butler, housekeeper, or personal secretaries became intermediaries, conveying dry business information. "Tell Mrs. N that I'm going on a business trip for a week," the husband would say to the butler, without even trying to go in and say goodbye to his wife. "Ask Mr. N when the dressmaker's bill will be paid," the wife would ask her maid. The house effectively became two separate households under one roof. Each spouse had their own staff, who served only their half of the household. The husband's valet and the wife's maid could talk to each other in the kitchen, but their masters lived in different worlds. This division was so deep that sometimes it seemed as if two complete strangers were living in the house. For the servants, this situation was the norm in high society. They had seen many similar examples and knew that behind the glittering facades of many mansions lay precisely this emptiness. They were accustomed to serving two masters who did not want to know each other and masterfully maneuvered between their separate worlds, trying to please both. This chapter in the history of the house was the longest and most hopeless. It showed that even the strongest passions and resentments burn out over time, leaving behind only the ashes of indifference, and that it is possible to live your whole life next to someone without ever really knowing them, remaining endlessly lonely in the golden cage of your marriage. Every unhappy marriage story in the Gilded Age had its own ending, and the servants were the ones who watched it from the front row. Sometimes it was a loud, scandalous breakup that shook the foundations of society, and sometimes it was a quiet, lifelong resignation to fate, when the spouses dragged out their hated union until the end of their days. Both options were tragic in their own way and left a deep mark on the souls of those who were unwitting witnesses to this drama. The butler ordered a carriage to the back entrance, and the footman silently carried the luggage. It was like fleeing the battlefield, surrendering to unbearable circumstances. At such moments, the servants often showed sincere sympathy for the departing party, especially if it was a woman who had decided to take such a desperate step. They understood that she was leaving for the unknown, risking losing everything: her position in society, financial support, and often her children. After the departure, the house was plunged into a strange stupor. The rooms of the departed spouse were locked, and the furniture was covered with cloths as if in mourning. The remaining spouse might show anger, grief, or cold indifference, but life at home inevitably changed. The servants whispered in corners, discussing the details of the escape and speculating about the future fate of their masters. When one spouse died, the other often experienced not so much grief as a complex feeling of relief mixed with guilt and familiar emptiness. The funeral was arranged with appropriate pomp, and the widowed spouse accepted condolences with appropriate sorrow on their face. But the servants knew that the true mourning for this marriage had begun many years ago, when an icy silence reigned behind closed doors for the first time. These final scenes were the last act in a long play about the glamour and misery of high society life. They showed that wealth and status often come at the highest price, the price of personal happiness and freedom, and that real tragedies do not happen on the stage, but in real life, behind the tightly closed curtains of luxurious mansions. We have walked with you through the corridors of time, peeking behind closed doors and listening to the whispers of the past. The story of servants who became silent witnesses to the collapse of the glittering marriages of the Gilded Age reveals to us the underside of a world that we have come to regard as the standard of beauty and prosperity. Behind every luxurious ball, every diamond necklace, and every perfectly set table, there could be a story of pain, loneliness, and unbearable pressure. Women living in these golden cages often paid for their status with their own happiness, health, and sometimes even their sanity. Only the servants, invisible and omnipresent, knew the whole truth about the price of this glamour. What other secrets did the great houses of the past hide behind their walls? What did their inhabitants keep silent about? And what did those who served them see? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new journeys into history.